So feel free to jump in with any questions on any topic that I bring up. Uh, Completely welcome it, and I think it makes for a fun evening if we get some interaction. So jump right in. A little bit of an origin story for Aesthetix. I had been working at a company called Theta Digital for a few years. I'd started at about 20 years old, and most of what I did at Theta was assembly, but I had a boss and some other people that worked there that were quite benevolent toward me and mentored me as I was ambitious and I had ambition toward designing my own equipment. And while I was an assembler, I was studying on the weekends. I had a math and physics background from college, but the electronics side was, I don't have a formal education in electronics. Audio is not something that is focused on in university. So I took a more personal approach, shall we say, and studied materials like I would buy old books, all old Radiotron Designer's Handbook and things like this, and learn from those as well as old equipment, Tektronix oscilloscopes, and so forth. So those were kind of my focus in my off time while I was working at Theta. And from a previous life of working in stereo stores as a teenager, I ended up with a Koetsu Rosewood Signature phono cartridge. And around this time, around 1993, digital had dominated the audio market. There was very little analog, very few records were being produced, very few tone arms, cartridges, turntables. It was pretty much just a trickle. Even companies that were known for analog products had heavily gone toward digital. They felt like they needed to survive. So here I am, a kid with this Koetsu Rosewood Signature cartridge and a good turntable and no phono stage. And as I said, all these companies had stopped making phono equipment. So there was actually no phono stage in the market that could handle it. There was nothing with enough gain. And so I kind of sat there and designed this phono stage in my head because I wanted a ton of gain of all tube. It was what I had known and learned from working in hi-fi stores that I loved tube equipment, even though I was working at a digital audio company that made solid state equipment. And again, this mentorship of my boss, Mike Moffat, who was known for tube equipment before Theta Digital, created an environment where I was able to learn. And so as I had designed this, I built a prototype on one chassis, kind of Frankenstein, wires going everywhere, and got it running through a lot of pain, and it had a lot of hum, a lot of noise, but it worked. And I ended up playing it for a friend of mine, and he listened to it and he said, "You have to make this." So I hadn't really planned on it being a company or even a product that was sold, but he kind of convinced me that I should at least make it available to other people in our local community. And like a lot of audio companies, I separated it into two chassis. This is actually the product. This is the latest version of what that product was in 1993. So it's two chassis, all tube. There's 8 tubes per channel in the audio chassis and another 8 tubes in the power supply. So it's 24 tubes total, 2 chassis. And that's what it turned into. And just through word of mouth, people started buying it in the Los Angeles area, and they would call a friend somewhere else, and I had a connection to a distributor in California who was importing and distributing cartridges and arms and turntables, and he wanted to represent it, which worked out very well because I was working full-time at Theta. This was just a labor of love. I never expected it to be anything real commercial, but I just made them nights and weekends, and that distributor took over the sales channel, the sales functions, and it just grew organically, word of mouth, and through dealers learning about it. And analog, at this time, it was still, you know, really at the bottom of the analog world. There just wasn't much happening. But there were dedicated audiophiles that had the record collections, didn't believe in digital, didn't believe, you know, just didn't hear an improvement over their records. And they got a hold of this and thought it was something really special. And so over the next several years, we made this and a companion line stage that uses the same power supply. And those were the only products for several years, probably 8 years. But they were really starting to sell in a lot more volume as analog made a bit of a resurgence through the late 90s. And so from there, I eventually left Theta Digital and did Aesthetix full-time and introduced Rhea and Calypso as the next products, which are essentially the same audio circuits as the 2-box, but in 1 box with solid-state power supplies. So it was pretty clear because of the success of these that there was a lot of demand, but the size and complexity and number of tubes and so forth would be a limiting factor for a lot of customers. So with these, Rhea as one of the first phono stages with 3 inputs, it had a lot of appeal, plus the pedigree of all tube and being able to handle a low output moving coil cartridge is something that is extremely difficult to achieve with tubes, to have the noise level low enough and so forth. And we were able to do that with Rhea in 1 box, which was even more daunting than, in a lot of ways, than this with the separate power supply. So after that, we introduced the Janus, which is essentially a Calypso with a smaller version of Rhea built into it. So a full function preamp with phono. And shortly after that, I don't want to say shortly, it was a few years, we introduced Atlas power amp. And then, believe it or not, after all that history in digital audio, the last product was Romulus in terms of product category. And that was because I wanted to wait and accrue a collection of technologies and feel like I had something really to say in that arena. And there were a number of contributions to that product from other people that made it, in my view, a special product. So the most recent product was Mimus, our integrated amplifier, which takes a lot from Calypso and a lot from Atlas and puts them in 1 box. So you can see there's a lot of like mixing and matching and pulling from here and pulling from there. The basic philosophies are all the same amongst all of our products, which is very heavy in power supply, multiple transformers, multiple chokes. A choke is a magnetic component that works in power supplies that is uncommon in our industry, that was common in the 60s and 50s and fell out of disfavor. Almost every product that we've ever made uses chokes. And I can go into that in more detail if anyone's interested. So heavy in power supply, multiple transformers, multiple regulation stages. Um, as we discussed previously, all tube for the most part, all tube voltage gain stages, zero feedback is a kind of a hallmark of Aesthetix. None of the products have any global feedback, and I believe that gives it certain qualities. It puts a lot of pressure and difficulty on us as manufacturers, as a manufacturer, because when you apply feedback to a circuit, you're correcting for component tolerances, you're correcting for imbalances. A lot of things in the circuit are being corrected by the feedback. So without feedback, the components have to be better matched. There's none of that correction is happening. So it all has to be designed, and component selection needs to be to a higher quality. So zero feedback. One area that's been an area I've spent a lot of attention is attenuation or volume controls. So the volume control in Calypso and the volume control in the line stage version of this, Callisto, were both areas of a lot of focus and design energy. So in Calypso, it's switched resistor. We switch individual resistors with switches. So you're not using a potentiometer. Potentiometers don't track well. They have very clear sonic characteristics of different types. There's a lot of different types of potentiometers that you can hear what each sounds like. With a switched resistor volume control, that's pretty much eliminated. But the circuitry gets much more complex because you're switching multiple resistors to get this full range of volume. And in Callisto, it's a similar switched resistor network, but it's with mechanical switches. So that's one of the things that separates the IO and Callisto from what we call the Saturn series, which is these products. Is IO and Callisto use mechanical switching, and these use electronic switching. There are some relays in some cases, but for the most part, it's FET switches or relays, things like that. So, any questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just trying to think, what do you think is your fundamental biggest achievement when you've been designing these, in as much as to make the Aesthetix more musical? Do you think you've got the most gain from having no feedback, no local feedback, or are you doing something like in the noise floor? Where do you think is the biggest improvement from your design years to the sonic signature of that beautiful sort of musicality, if you like?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's balance. I think if you focus on only one area, you don't achieve a collective end result. So everything from power supply to chassis design to the fact that it's zero global feedback, and the pressures that puts on us in terms of component matching and component quality. It isn't, for me, it's not any one thing, it's everything. And it's not so much a commercial enterprise in that we're trying to produce a new product every year and meet some sort of goals, sales goals or something like that. This is my life's passion. So I only want to introduce a product that I feel is something special and something special in the market, something unique in the market, and something I would want to live with. And that's what's important to me. And that has led to us being able to stay in business. You know, and that to me is success. Over 30 years that we're able to feed ourselves and have this life. Come here to Australia is a dream come true for me.
Terrific, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Jim, you're now making your own transformers.
Yes.
What advantage does that bring to Aesthetix that you're now doing that in-house from what you were doing in the early days?
There's a couple areas that it helps us, and a couple reasons that we took it on. It was a major task for us. It was quite daunting to even consider doing it. Very few audio companies do it. The advantages it gives us is complete control of the quality. Transformer manufacturing in audio is largely a commodity. Companies will go to a transformer manufacturer. It may be local, it may be not local, it may be offshore, it may be strictly based on price. They may not know the transformer manufacturer may not know anything about what it's going into. They just know a specification, and there you go. And I was very fortunate over the early years and up until relatively recently. I think we started making our own transformers 6 or 7 years ago, to work with a transformer company that knew about audio, cared about audio, and was local to us. So the transformers we have used up until that point were very high quality. The decision to go on our own was largely based on being able to 100% control the quality, and focus on taking those ideas and going further with them. And it's made me a better designer of audio equipment that I now am able to design transformers. I didn't realize in all those years I would give the designer the voltages and currents I needed. I didn't realize the massive number of variables that went into producing that. You can do it with more turns, less turns, more insulation, etc., etc. So the ability to bring that in-house, make multiple prototypes. I can prototype almost any transformer here in a day, and be able to listen to what that one sounds like or see how that one performs and dial it in further and further. So that, along with being able to control the quality, has not only improved us as a company, but changed me as a designer, because I can see all these variables at play. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it was very informative. Can you tell us a bit about your team and where you manufacture?
So we're in California, Southern California, near Los Angeles, and we have a small crew of about 8 people. My son is our production manager, so there is a future past me. And he's been learning a ton and is helping in the design phase. And he, ironically, is spending his nights and weekends learning electronics. He's actually smarter than me in a lot of ways, and you can see I'm quite proud. My other son is a mechanical engineer, so that's fun. Also, he worked on Mimas. So there's my son, and there's another colleague named Glenn, who has been with me for over 20 years, and even before that we worked at Theta together. And he does so many different functions in the company. that it would be unfair to him to say he does this, because we're a small company, so every person does a lot of functions, but he's instrumental in the operation. And a lot of what we hire for assembly or for transformer winders and things like this are local college students and engineering students for the most part. And that's really fun because they come in with a lot of ideas and a lot of energy and strong backs. And it just makes it a really fun environment. So I hope that answers your question. And I'd like to go a little further in terms of our local area. So our metal supplier is within an hour's drive from us, and they make everything you see. They make every part of what you see. The circuit board assembly is about 20 minutes from us. Coupling capacitors are 3 hours from us in San Diego. As I said, we make our own transformers. So almost everything that's possible to be made locally is made locally. So that also is part of what's important to me, is that control of quality and that the relationships with our vendors. Yes.
Jim, you talked a lot about the number of tubes that you have in your devices. Is it worth just giving us a run through what types of tubes and the rationale for the tubes you've chosen?
Sure. So for the most part, I pick very easy to get tubes, and we use a lot of common types. So the predominant tube I use is a 12AX7, which has a lot of gain and is intended for audio applications. There are many variants of it, many suppliers. There's NOS, and that was important to me for the products to last and not become a burden on the owner to find tubes for it. And as this is now approaching 30 years in manufacture, I think that's pretty uncommon in our industry. And this uses 18 12AX7s, so you can see it's predominantly 12AX7s. The other tubes are 6922, which is a 6DJ8. Again, very common, many manufacturers, current and old, so not going anywhere. EL34s, 6SN7. So the cases where I don't use 12AX7s is I need a higher current tube, a lower impedance tube, or a power tube as a regulator. So just depends on function for the most part. Well, should we take oh, yeah, go ahead.
A lot of your products come as a standard, a signature, and an eclipse. So that way you can obviously buy them as a standard, and then you can upgrade it by using different modules. Could you describe the difference that these two higher levels do for the sound or the performance?
The goal of the improved versions is to maintain the basic character of the standard version. It's not something, if you take a Rhea and you go to a Signature or Eclipse, you still know it's a Rhea. It still sounds like a Rhea. But a Signature has more resolution, more openness, better bass, better extension. It's like a Rhea, but more of it. And an Eclipse is, again, just that same kind of, it's mostly through component changes and through some different grounding and isolation and component changes on the audio boards that it just goes to another level. And these are the kinds of changes where you could take it and make it a new product name. We keep it as the same product name, Signature or Eclipse, because we want to be able to upgrade and not obsolete products. That's important to me. Nothing in audio is changing every year that you need a new product. This is a pretty stable, in terms of technology, pretty stable industry. In fact, if anything, it's getting more difficult as fewer discrete components are being manufactured. It's kind of going the other direction. Yes, sir.
So Jim, when you're talking about the actual components, and you're going like fewer of the actual components are being made, like the discrete
Yep.
components. So what happens like there? Like, I mean, how do you overcome that to get the sonic signature that you're after when you go, look, the manufacturers just aren't making those. So what do you do then?
Suffer.
So
It's a lot of pain.
yeah,
I mean, over the past few years, so many components have become obsolete, and we don't have many options. We can buy thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands to be able to manufacture something for years and be able to supply parts for repair or what have you. Or we have to design in something new and find new solutions. It's really not easy. One area where parts are disappearing is MOSFETs. I won't bore you with the gory details, but it's become quite difficult in discrete solid state components, and even some silly things are becoming difficult, like electrolytic capacitors. But it's kind of the ebb and flow of life, right?
I just want to say, excuse me, I don't flip gear very much, having had my last CD player for about 22 years. But I bought your Romulus after listening to it from Mark after a couple of months, and I enjoy it nearly as much as my vinyl, if not as much, because I think it imparts. It's not vinyl, but it's not. It's just got a completely different sound of its own, which I really enjoy a lot. And I've got a huge collection of jazz of CDs going back to the 60s, and I would just say that I really enjoy the sound of it. And I didn't think I'd ever change from the one I had before, but I did.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it's great. I hope that's good over.
Thank you. And honestly, this is
And I'm not going into any technical because I'm sort of a musician, not an audiophile.
this is really the only reason we exist. It's this kind of word of mouth
Yeah,
promotion
yeah,
is how we exist.
yeah.
And the fact that it means the equipment does something with the music that makes the music more meaningful,
Yeah.
or more communicative, or creates a different kind of connection. That's all I care about.
Same for me.
Yeah. Should we take a break and play some music?
Yeah, we can.
I think it's a great idea.
All right. We can speak more later.
Yeah.